Have you ever heard of a Minivania game before? I hadn't, but the beauty of this channel is that I, and therefore you, get to stumble upon unique or interesting ideas, and I'm excited to find out what this micro-genre is all about. But first, we need to look at a game that claims to have invented a brand new type of puzzle. Except that it's been around since the 9th century AD. My name is Graeldon, I'm on an impossible journey to review every Steam game in alphabetical order, and today we're playing 100 Nya, 100 Pumpkins, and its sequel, creatively named 100 Pumpkins 2. Let's begin. Chess, but with only one knight. You heard me right, this is 100 Nya, a game that is basically a digital version of the classic game/challenge called Knight's Tour. The aim of this game is to move your knight in the typical L-shaped pattern in an attempt to land on every space on the board without landing on the same space twice. Now, I know what you're thinking, and if you want to hear about the Minivania thing, you'll just have to wait a few minutes while I tear apart this awful game first. Wait, that wasn't what you were thinking? You want to know how much this game costs? Ah, well, it's $14.50 dues, which feels completely reasonable considering that you can play a free version of this game by going to maths-resources.com/knights. That was sarcasm, by the way. So, what do we actually have going on here? 100 Nya was released onto Steam on the 14th of November 2016 by MYW, and according to the in-game information, it also released onto Android devices in 2017, although I haven't been able to actually find it there. What confuses me is that they claim the game was originally developed in 1995, but the electronic prototype was created in 2011. So, what did they have in 1995 then? A physical version of the game? Or are they trying to say that they created the premise of the game in 1995? Because that would imply that 100 Nya is somehow fundamentally different to the Knight's Tour, which it simply isn't. It just baffles me that they don't reference the Knight's Tour anywhere, not in the game or the store page. It's like they actually hadn't heard of it before, which might explain their bold claims, confidence, and completely unwarranted high praise for the game. Since then, MYW have released one other game on Steam called Hot Earth Invasion, and judging from the trailer, it's certainly something. Definitely a game. Upon starting 100 Nya, we're treated to the developer logo and then a title screen that looks like it was lovingly crafted in paint, with a 3D rendered orb behind it rotating at 5 frames per second, all set to heavy metal guitar music, and I have to say, this is not the vibe I was expecting. Heading into the options/info section, we can set the language, adjust the music volume, and toggle on or off music and effects, although I'm not sure what the effects option is for as there aren't any sound effects in the game. The panel on the right actually doesn't display anything by default, but you can use the drop-down selection to view either information about the game devs or instructions for playing the game. In the developer section, we learn that the music used is by a band called Disasterisk. The play instruction section explains the general rules and the differences between the 3 difficulty levels, and then you need to click the button helpfully labelled Apple to return to the main menu. I'm assuming that was meant to say apply, and I'm not sure if this is the result of a mistranslation or simple typo, but it did make me giggle. Right, let's look at some gameplay. Spoiler alert, it's boring. Unlike normal 8x8 chessboards, 100 Nya uses a 10x10 size, but otherwise standard Knight's Tour rules apply. Pick a starting position and then make as many moves as possible without landing on the same space twice. The green marker is your current position, available moves are highlighted tiles, and red markers are tiles you've previously moved to. Controls are simple, just click to move. You need to be careful though, as there isn't an undo function. Once you click, you've committed. This is an interesting choice because even the free version at maths-resources has an undo button. I'd love to tell you more about the game, but that's basically it. The harder difficulty levels just remove hints and add in a timer. There aren't any achievements to earn, which is odd because I was expecting a global leaderboard or even some unlockables like new backgrounds or pieces, partly because the trailer and images show different art to what is actually in-game, and I can't see any options to change it anywhere. Maybe the alternative themes were just limited time holiday themes, but it feels strange for them to be removed permanently. Ultimately, your playtime here may vary greatly, anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes or infinity. Why? Because Knight's Tour is a solved problem. There are websites you can use that will map out your moves for you based on a given starting position. Some might call this cheating, but I call it research. So unless you happen to be an expert at Knight's Tour, trying to solve this without outside assistance could very well take a lifetime given the sheer number of combinations of moves. That said, if you choose to spend the rest of your life playing this game, I think you might have bigger problems to work through. Lastly, I have no clue what the nya is in reference to. The game is by Russian devs, as far as I can tell, and nya doesn't directly translate to anything and is just a cat sound, like a meow. I almost didn't bother including this section because there's nothing left to say about the game that hasn't been said already. Is this game worth your time? Not really, no. Is this game worth your money? Absolutely not. Is this game a good version of the Knight's Tour challenge? Also no. Personally, I always find it incredibly frustrating when the most positive thing that can be said about a game is that it plays. The graphics are basic and unappealing, the music doesn't fit the game thematically, and the entire game premise is based on a concept that is over 1,000 years old, yet they try to claim they've invented it themselves, and everything is simply outclassed by a free web-based version. Even if it had unlockables, leaderboards, monthly themes, or gave away a car to the fastest time each month, this would still be a tough sell to anyone. Actually, maybe that last one would help. Someone needs to get on that idea. Personally, the most disappointing thing to me is the lack of anything cat related. I was expecting sound effects or at least cat icons for board pieces. I understand what this game is trying to achieve, but I'm confused about why it's trying to do it in the way that it does, presented in this way. And somehow, in spite of all this, it has a positive rating in the Steam store, so let's take a look at them. The first is just some ASCII art of a butt. Nice. 3 people found that helpful and need to go outside more. Most of the reviews are in Russian, and if it weren't for the fact that most of them are from 2016 to 2018, I would say they were written by AI bots, but the timing makes that unlikely, so the best guess is that they've had very, very little exposure to video games. This one says, "The game is not bad and makes you think. If the graphics were more beautiful, it would be great." A second review says, "In general, I buy games only for the cards, but after paying attention to the prices for the cards, twice as much as the game itself, I was interested. The game is quite interesting. Every time I find a new way to complete the game, I've already collected about 6 combinations. Judging by the description, there are about 10,000 of them. Correction, there's actually well over 1 billion. Well, I will look. The game is constantly updated. The developer is working on the game, constantly improving the game. Even despite the low cost of the game has its shortcomings. Of course, but overall the game turned out pretty good. I sold the cards for 54 rubles each, and I made the badge myself. My rating is 1010 out of 100 nya. I have already played more than 7 hours of this game, it still remains my favourite. I hope the developer will continue to delight me with updates to this wonderful game in the future." I should also mention that this review was updated, presumably with the last few lines, on the 27th of November 2023. They now have 78 hours on record, but I assume most of this was spent idling for cards. The comment did make me curious though, as I know Steam does use regional pricing, and sure enough, 100 nya only costs 259 rubles, which converts to roughly $4 dues or 250 freedom bucks. So good to know that I got, without a shadow of a doubt, completely and utterly ripped off in more ways than one. So, with all of that in mind, my final rating for 100 nya is an L out of 10. Like the movement of the knight, 100 nya took a wrong turn in the line of development. And then another, and 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 another. Let's move on to what you've been waiting for, and the reason you probably clicked this video. 100 pumpkins. Well, more likely the sequel, but we'll come to that soon enough. 100 Pumpkins released on the 9th of October 2021, and 100 Pumpkins 2 released on the 2nd of December 2023. Both games are by Jeremiah Stilts, and are the only games they've released so far, and I have to say, they've started out pretty strongly. There are a lot of similarities between the two games, especially on a mechanical level, and I personally love seeing the graphical and stylistic improvements between them. Visually, it's very similar to comparing a NES game with a SNES game, for example comparing the original Metroid to Super Metroid, and I think it speaks volumes about the devs' growth between the two games. I'm also a fan of older platforming games, so these were right up my alley, and I'm pleased to report that for the most part, they managed to meet my expectations. So, where does this whole Minivania thing come into it? Well, both games share a lot of elements commonly found in Metroidvania-style games. Single, cohesive overworld that can be freely explored? Check. Room-based map? Check. Equal parts combat, platforming, and puzzle solving? Check. Upgrades or unlockables that allow you to reach previously inaccessible areas? Check. What makes these games more special is that everything is crammed into a 10 by 10 grid, and each area is only the size of a single screen, meaning that the game can be easily beaten in a single session. Let's start by looking at the first game, 100 Pumpkins. In terms of its presentation, it's pretty basic, or perhaps retro is a better description. Everything is blocky and usually only a single colour, but that doesn't get in the way of things in the slightest. In fact, although the main menu is pretty bare bones, I appreciate that it's presented as part of the game, acting as a mini tutorial, and even adapts the input icons depending on your controller type. Fun fact though, I had to beat this game twice because it didn't record properly the first time. That's dedication and surely worth a like on the video, right? The first level is quite interesting as it tells us a lot about what to expect from the game. Firstly, the text at the bottom will sometimes give helpful clues or information. Now we know not to search for more than one pumpkin per area, and we can clearly see the pumpkin here. Secondly, there is a mini-map in the bottom left that shows our current position in the world grid. Thirdly, we have two pieces of information at the top of the screen. On the top right, we have a percentage, presumably a completion tracker, and this turns out to be correct as it increases after collecting the first pumpkin. On the top left, we have a pumpkin icon with a face and a number. This is a death counter. Thirdly, although we can only exit to the right, we can see a path above where the vine leads. It's inaccessible right now, but we can probably use this to make a shortcut later on, allowing us to navigate more easily. And lastly, the Scarecrow character isn't named, so this is now Larry. All of these things are great examples of unspoken tutorials, allowing the player to figure things out from visual and/or contextual information without the need for a full explanation. In the next screen, the area text changes and we learn that not only is there a map, but the rooms in it also change colour to show if a pumpkin has been found there or not. We also have the first hazard, which would allow the player to test and confirm the death count theory. Unfortunately, that would also lock them out of the perfect achievement, awarded for beating the game without dying, but you are pretty unlikely to get that in your first attempt considering the number of death traps that have been implemented here. Lastly, the third screen teaches the player about pitchforks, which are weapons that can be collected and then thrown to hurt or kill enemies. This path has been linear so far, so it's only natural that after learning the basics of the game, the path then immediately splits, giving the player a choice of 3 directions to choose from. Additionally, we see a pumpkin that is tantalizingly out of reach, suggesting that backtracking to areas in specific ways will be important to find everything. From here, the game is all about exploration, trial, and error. Thanks to the great tutorial setup, you're constantly on the lookout for alternative routes and hidden pumpkins, as well as checking the area name for possible clues. Not all of them are helpful though, such as this one simply called More Busy Work. And I think that describes how I feel about the level design in general. Most areas feel like they've had some thought put into them in terms of a platforming or combat challenge, but there are many connecting areas where it feels like the dev ran out of creative steam. Comedic fourth wall breaks help to ease some of the repetition, but the jokes only work the first time. If you've had to backtrack through one of these areas multiple times, it overstays its welcome. Thankfully, there are a number of boss fights scattered throughout which help to break up the platforming a bit. The spider boss is pretty simple. Oh, hey, isn't that Sans from Undertale? But the snake can be somewhat challenging with the other obstacles to avoid. Once the 99th pumpkin has been found, an extra platform appears in the area in the top left, allowing you to grab the final pumpkin, and you're shown an end screen that displays how many times you died. Personally, I died 12 times, but keep in mind, this was my second run of the game, and the less than 10 deaths achievement feels pretty doable, but good luck with the 0 death run. My playthrough took roughly 17.5 minutes, and it's worth noting that the entire time the only accompaniment on my journey were the in-game sound effects. There isn't any music, which is interesting considering that the Steam store page has music. It just didn't make it into the final game, and this may have been a choice for the better considering that the trailer uses a roughly 20-second loop that would be grating by the end of a run. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might have noticed that 100 Pumpkins didn't quite fulfill the Minivania criteria. It doesn't have any upgrades that unlock inaccessible areas. It came pretty close to the mark, even going so far as having progression-based unlockable shortcuts, but Larry never gains any new abilities, and no, I'm not counting the pitchfork because that's a single-use item, not an ability. On its own, this game is maybe a bit of a tough one to recommend. It's a bit rough around the edges and it's a bit basic and lackluster at times, but it had to be made. The dev needed to walk before they could run, and this game laid the foundation for the sequel to build upon. Speaking of, let's look at 100 Pumpkins 2. It's immediately noticeable how much more vibrant and colourful this game is compared to the first. All of the artwork is much more detailed and there is motion in almost every area, creating a world that feels much more alive while retaining almost all of the principles of the original game. The game world is still based on a 10x10 grid with one pumpkin in each area. The area naming being used as hints still persists, as do the minimap, pumpkin tally and death counter, only now everything has been moved to the bottom of the screen to help declutter things. However, the map now uses one colour to show an explored room and another to show that a pumpkin has been found in it. Additionally, a new mechanic has been introduced in the form of gates. We find the first after grabbing the second pumpkin, and thanks to the level name, learn that we need to go back to the starting zone. This is where, at the beginning of the game, all of the pumpkins were stolen by birds, leaving only one behind, which becomes Larry. Foreshadowing. Bringing pumpkins home and standing on this platform will place pumpkins onto their respective shelves, filling up the meter on the left of the screen. As this bar fills up, Larry will gain access to new areas, as well as abilities such as a double jump and a dash. And not only are these cool abilities, but it also means that we are now firmly in Minivania territory. Not only does Larry get access to these new movement abilities, but upon finding the pitchfork, it actually becomes a permanent weapon rather than a single-use item, and it's also used for platforming. After throwing the pitchfork, it can become embedded in a wall, acting as a platform. Pressing the action button again will recall the pitchfork, much like recalling the axe in God of War. Damn, I really need to play those games. Something about the animation and moveset of Larry reminds me of Wario though, specifically Wario from Wario Land 3, a game that was released before many of you were born. I'm not 100% sure why though. It might be something to do with the bounciness of the movement when running or the slightly evil expression on Larry's face, but whatever the answer is, I'm here for it. With pitchfork in hand, Larry sets off to recover the stolen pumpkins, and one thing that I absolutely adore here is that there are 0 wasted areas. Each area has its own obstacle or puzzle to solve. The run through here because I've run out of ideas areas are gone, which is a massive win for Jeremiah. Like the first game, the map is divided into differently themed areas like the forest, caves, mines, graveyard, mandatory ice zone, and even space. Some of these areas were present in the first game, and once again it's lovely to see a homage to the original, but also to see it expanded upon, with each area having mechanics or obstacles unique to it, as well as zone-specific music. Now, in all honesty, as much as I appreciate the presence and variety of the music, I wasn't much of a fan of the music itself. All of the tracks are fairly thematic, but they are also lacking a lot of melody. There is only one instrument line, so no percussion, harmony, or chords to flesh the tracks out. I'm assuming that Jeremiah also composed the music, so I don't want to be too critical, but if there is ever a 100 Pumpkins 3 in the works, the music is the one area that I'd love to see getting the most care and attention, because pretty much everything else has been nailed. One other aspect that could use some attention though are the backgrounds. While the foregrounds are pretty detailed with grass, flowers, flowing water, etc., most of the backgrounds are just a single colour, and while they are serviceable, they don't give much of a sense of the larger world. Now, back to things the game does well. Boss fights. The snake and sand spider are back again, this time with new mechanics that make them much more challenging, but they've also added in 2 new bosses. The flock of birds that stole the pumpkins at the start of the game, and a special, hidden super boss, accessed by falling asleep in a bale of hay. This thing is entirely optional and is only accessible after beating all of the other bosses, and of course, it's tough as nails. I did manage to beat it though, but only after racking up nearly 40 deaths. There is also a secret hidden retro snake boss that gives a special pumpkin, but sadly it doesn't count towards the 100 total. After exploring everywhere and defeating everything, we're only at 99 pumpkins. I was a bit confused and then remembered, we are the final pumpkin. Climb up and then fall down and Larry's precious pumpkin pate will pop off, landing on the shelf, and Larry's clothes will crumple into a pile on the ground. Unfortunately, because I had 202 deaths, substantially more than the 10 required for the good ending, poor Larry's pumpkin head is knocked onto the ground, splattering into pieces. You might be familiar with the proverb of learning to crawl before you can walk, and with 100 Pumpkins 1 and 2, I think Jeremiah Stilts has demonstrated this beautifully. The first game lays out the foundations for what the second game can then become, and this is something that I hope a lot of aspiring developers can learn from. Your first game doesn't need to be perfect. Heck, it won't be perfect, but you will learn from it. So the first step in your journey is to simply make something, from start to finish. Once you have a finished project, you can then sit back and honestly critique it, consider what worked and what didn't work, and then apply it to the next project you work on. Now, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm a big fan of Josh Strife Hayes. If you haven't heard of him before, go watch his content after this. He's a legend. He recently put out videos on Kingsfield 1 and 2, old PlayStation 1 games from FromSoft, who are better known for the lesser known indie darlings Dark Souls and Elden Ring. In those videos, Josh posits that the team at FromSoft have always wanted to make Dark Souls, but they didn't have the tech or the skills, so they made Kingsfield first. And I personally found it fascinating seeing some of the iconic aspects that we now associate with the Dark Souls games being established in games many, many years earlier. All of that is to say that I get the same sense here, albeit on a smaller scale. Jeremiah wanted to make a condensed 2D platformer with Metroidvania elements in a bite-sized package. The first version proved that the premise works, and the second version evolved almost every aspect in a meaningful way. I think both games are priced pretty reasonably too, with the first coming in at $2.95 and the second at $5.95. I sincerely hope that Jeremiah continues, because the third or fourth version could be something very special indeed, and is a game that I would look forward to playing someday. If I had to summarize this, and I kind of do, that's the point of this whole section, I would say that these two games have nailed the thematic stylings and core mechanics, but there is still a lot left to polish. And if the micro-genre that is Minivanias ever gains more traction, I hope that Jeremiah receives due recognition for his role with defining it. So, with all of that in mind, my final rating for 100 Pumpkins is Go Ahead Dauntlessly, out of 10. It's rough, but it is a trailblazer forging ahead. And my final rating for 100 Pumpkins 2 is a caterpillar, out of 10. It's growing and could turn into a beautiful butterfly. Or a moth. Either option's fine. It's the capacity for potential that matters here. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the end of the video. Today's Larry is sponsored by the newest noble knight, Athia. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you to all the members supporting this channel and allowing me to continue this silly project, and as always, a special thank you to our Knight of the Holy Grail, Freaky Feline. If you'd like to sponsor a Larry in a future video or just help support the channel, please check out the links below. That's all for now, so if you've made it this far, here's a sneak peek of the next game. And until next time, take care.